We've got about 2 years under our belt now at ECRF with growing soybean varieties. The first year was 2013, and we grew mostly North Star varieties. There was quite a difference in the height of the varieties. There was also a bit of a height difference in the height of the lowest pod. However, all of the pods are pretty low to the ground. I tried to shave the ground and get every pod, and I did, and I also got some rocks, and so I'm not doing that again. In 2014, this is more what our plots looked like after harvest. We had to leave some behind. It's just too hard on the machinery. Anyway, in 2013, Mooseman was a very short season variety in the pack. Tilston wasn't too far behind. And the curious thing was a variety like Lebeau had the same corn heat unit rating but was maturing much later than Tilston. And North Star has recognized this, and they're trying to work out why you can have varieties that will mature at the same time down south and then at different times up north. They don't think it's related to photoperiod, but it might be related to sensitivity to a cold shock, either at seeding or during the growing season. And so they're working with Ag Canada to try and narrow that down still. We tried to contribute by seeding early into cold soils and later into warmer soils, but we missed the boat. We couldn't get out there early enough to seed into 5-degree soil. The weather just didn't allow us. So we ended up seeding May 22nd into 9-degree soil and June 3rd into 15-degree soil. Now, despite not making our objective, we still have some interesting results to present. The varieties that we worked with were mostly North Star varieties, but we had a Brett Young variety, a DeKalb variety, a Pioneer Hybrid variety, and a Thunder Seeds variety that were in the pack. If we look at the first seeding date, varieties like Tilston, Thunder Seeds variety, and Vito were near the top of the pack, and varieties that were at the bottom were like Mooseman and the Pioneer variety P001 T34R. Both of those varieties are short season, but they're short statured, and unfortunately short season and short statured you tend to give up yield. Now, when we look at the June 3rd seeding, the differences between varieties weren't as great, weren't as many. But you'll notice that the Pioneer Hybrid variety has gone from being at the bottom of the pack to near the top of the pack. And the reason for this is it was pretty much the only variety that matured properly when seeded late. It's that much earlier maturing. If I put both yield data together, you can see that most of the varieties got hammered by frost and their yield was reduced by seeding late into June 3rd. Now, if we look above me, we've got the early seeded plots, and below me are the late seeded plots. Now, you can see that P001 T34R is maturing quite a bit ahead of the other varieties out here. And if we go a little bit farther into the future, you can see that anything that we seeded on the early side seems to be maturing properly, but when we look at the late seeded stuff, only the Pioneer Hybrid variety is maturing properly. The other ones basically have been frosted out. The leaves are dying, they're wilted, they haven't gone brown and fallen off normally. There were a number of small flat pods at the top that just went straight through the combine. Hence, the lower yields that were found with the late seeding date. Now I wondered, how was this going to affect our grade? Well, the Pioneer Hybrid variety did fine, whether it was seeded early or late. It made the grade, which is number 2, which is the highest grade we have for our GMO. Anything that was seeded early, all made number 2 for a grade. It looks a little greener here in the picture, but you can tolerate a lot more green seed than in soybeans than you can in canola. Now, when seeded late, the Tilston and the Enola, pretty much all the varieties that, other than the Pioneer variety, did not quite make the grade. They were graded number 3. And the graders said that, well, if he had lots of soybeans around that he could blend with, he still would have graded them number 2, as they were only just number 3s if he could blend them off. So let's go back in time. On my right, we have 2013. On my left, we have 2014. Both plots are Mooseman. They were seeded almost at the same date, the same calendar date, and the picture was taken at the same calendar date. It's quite a difference in maturity between the two. When I look at the data for accumulated corn heat units, 2014 was a little cooler in the fall, but there must have been other factors there contributing to the soybeans going longer. Perhaps moisture was playing a role as well. But quite a difference. In 2014, you probably would have needed a grain dryer definitely to get those soybeans off the ground. So in conclusion, growing soybeans is still risky. It's getting better, and I'm sure we're going to grow them in the future, but it's a little bit risky still. That optimum window is pretty narrow. You don't want to seed too early because you'll seed into 5-degree soil and you'll cold shock them. And if you seed too late, you're going to get frosted, potentially frosted at the other end. We do have short season varieties to cut the risk, but you're also cutting yield. There is a variety of the Tilston that I got my eye on because it was shorter season and it's been 2 years running in the top of the pack for yield. But I'm sure there's other varieties out there that fit that description as well. Don't just go by the data from this one site. There are other sites out there, and the important thing is to look at data from multiple sites to get a sense for the yield stability of a variety.